Real life.
Superpowers.
Entrepreneurship is an instinct. It's not about experience. It's either you have it or you don't. You can learn some of the traits, but I think it's something that is mostly instinctive.
Hey everyone! Today we speak with Udi Ziv, CEO of Earnix, a startup that he stepped into in order to scale and successfully turned it into a unicorn. He's a serial entrepreneur, selected by the Wall Street Journal as one of 100 Israeli tech leaders you need to know. He has a lot of experience-based insights on what it takes to succeed as an entrepreneur. Enjoy your listen.
Real life.
Superpowers.
Up in the sky, it's a bird. It's a plane.
Gentlemen, we can rebuild him. We have the technology.
It's alive!
Real life.
Superpowers.
So welcome to Real Life Superpowers.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
What are you up to these days?
Oh, so many things. It's Q4, and what a CEO does in Q4, chase deals. It's mostly what I'm doing, like every year for the last 31 years. And on a personal note, 2 kids that are abroad, which is where are they? What are they up to? Are they safe? That's roughly it.
And you said that you feel like for 30 years you're chasing deals. Is that some form of essence, or is that sort of something that has to go with the job?
No, it goes with the job. It's the core of what the company is about, getting the business done. And obviously as the year gets to an end, every quarter gets to an end, that's mostly what companies are dealing with. Finding the balance, because it's also a quarter where we plan the year ahead. So it's kind of the contradiction of thinking 12 and maybe 24 or 36 months forward, at the same time, on an hourly basis, checking where the deals are. That's kind of the reality of our lives.
Do you like the chase?
Absolutely. It's fun. It's the adrenaline. It's like, it's like the new world hunting. And some people use that term for sales, right? It's the thrill of hunting. Absolutely.
Was it always a key drive for you?
Adrenaline is, and hunting gives you a lot of adrenaline, but in the younger stages of companies, I've been, entrepreneur and running large organizations, you don't hunt anything. You basically build stuff, and that also has adrenaline. Inventing things is gives you a huge adrenaline rush. So it could be anything, but hunting is definitely on the good and bad sides. I mean, it doesn't always work, and often you in our business, you may spend 12 months chasing a customer, and at the last day, they may say, look, things are tough now. Let's talk next year. So there's also that side of the business. But yeah, it is fun.
What's the difference between hunting adrenaline as a corporate executive between being an entrepreneur and hunting? There should be a different kind of adrenaline rush. It's a different kind of deal hunting, isn't it? Yeah,
definitely. And I think the difference is survival. When you're a small startup, when you're an entrepreneur, every customer you hunt, and, maybe you should move away from that term, but is about surviving. It's about, will I make it or not? When you're running a large organization, it's, I hate to say this, but it's one of many that, are happening at the same time. And, you measure yourself and you're being measured in a similar fashion, but each instance of a customer, means less. You're a large corporation versus a startup. It's much more kind of core, much more basic.
And then how do you, if it's a big organization, then how do you try to double down, I guess, on culture and trying to see how, you want everybody on the sales team to be hungry and to mourn each deal as if it's a startup. So, but then at like a high level, it's not the case. So how do you strike a form of balance in that respect with respect to mindset?
Yeah, first of all, for each individual, I mean, the way large corporations are built, if they do it right, for each individual, it is a matter of life and death, whether they win or not, the deal. When you look at an aggregated, maybe it's less so, but if I do my job right, each one of the people will feel it's life or death for them. But generally speaking, about culture, I'm not the one that believes in values printed on walls. I'm much more of a culture is built and established by looking at examples. And people look at me. People look at how I or other people in the company behave and how important things are for them, how emotional it is. And I think the word emotional is a positive word. If you take your business, to your heart, people sense that, and it's contagious almost. People see it and they want to be and do the same.
I used to think that brand framework and a company mission and vision are a bit of fluff, maybe even BS. And then as I sort of evolved, I realized that it actually doesn't have to be hollow words. And I think the companies that do best are ones where if you speak to an employee in the corridor, you can really sense the company vision and mission just from a conversation about the environment in the office. And it doesn't have to be, verbatim what they state it is, but just in general, when it's wrapped and aligned around the same goals, I think it does matter. Do you agree?
Absolutely. But for that, it needs to be real. I think vision and mission, all of it is setting the vector for yourself and for the people that are around you. Absolutely. That's important. As long as it's real. As long as it's not just words that sound or look right. In that case, people basically, at best ignore and even worse, can become cynical about it. So if it's real, if you're really about what you were saying you're about, absolutely. And then it's always hard work to get the whole organization to actually feel that. And I agree with you, unless it's coming from, unless you can hear the echo coming from employees in the company, it's meaningless. It's just words.
And your journey has been quite a successful one. Did you grow up in an entrepreneurial environment?
Absolutely not. Not as a personal, child growing up, not in a family of entrepreneurs. Absolutely not. I actually stumbled on entrepreneurship with a good friend, a person named Shai Bassi, who is 200% entrepreneur at heart. We became friends in school, and he asked me to join him. And that was my entrepreneurship school, just being with him. Just to put it in perspective, this was 1991 when we started. There were no VCs in Israel. Just to paint a picture of how different Israel was at the time in terms of starting companies. We were completely bootstrapped by people that didn't have the funds, meaning it's a very different journey. But Shai and actually his father Reuben were really entrepreneurs that and grabbed me with them, and the three of us basically created something that became something very, very significant the old ways, without raising millions and millions of dollars from day one, etc. And
how much did their experience play in?
Entrepreneurship is an instinct. It's not about experience. It's either you have it or you don't. You can learn some of the traits, but I think it's something that is mostly instinctive. And I think they've done a beautiful job. I think all of us together is, there's a big word I use a lot, and that is balance. So how do you take anything and create a balance between the different factors? And I think there was a great balance in how we started between, being a true entrepreneur and going crazy and doing things the right way, building it the right way, etc. And I think this is what got, the company we founded Top Tier to become, very, very successful in the way it was run.
And you're saying it's an instinct, and I agree. But the fact that you had such experienced partners, did you feel like you were looking to them as mentors?
Well, Reuven Agassi, Shai's father, was very experienced. Shai was absolutely not experienced. That's why I'm saying it's instinct. Having said that, absolutely. I think you can have mentors that are very young. I think mentorship is not only about experience, definitely not about age. It's about the traits you have. And I think, again, the beautiful thing we had is that we each mentored each other in what we were strong at. And from an entrepreneurship perspective, from taking the risk, dreaming big, definitely I was mentored. And then, maybe on the doing it right, and building something solid, I'm fairly sure they would say I was mentoring them. And again, that's a great balance you get in a good partnership.
If you had to give like a certain attribute of each one of the teammates, meaning, let's say Shai, Reuven, yourself, what would be like the one characteristic, key differentiation between each one?
Reuven was the experienced, solid businessman who basically taught us the basics of business. When we were kids, we were very young, we were early 20s. Shai was a dreamer, brilliant, probably the most impressive, talented, successful dreamer I've ever worked with. And I was the executioner. I had to get stuff done. And I think the combination of the three was really very well balanced. We fought a lot. It always, for the employees later on, it always looked like one big happy family, but we fought a lot. I mean, we had a lot of arguments because you get a lot of different vectors pulling in different directions. But at the end of the fight, and, we used to have a tiny conference room where we sometimes spend nights arguing, raising our voices, but when we walked out in the morning, it was always, here's the decision, here's how we do things, and it worked beautifully. Again, it created the balance of the company.
What was the idea? What made you join this?
Yeah, there wasn't any idea. We knew we wanted to do something. We didn't know what. It was bootstrapped, so basically the first 5 years of the stock year was, we were doing projects for other companies. But doing it in a smart way, meaning we were able to keep the core technology, the pieces of core technology created throughout these years to ourselves. And without funding, remember, so we had to fund ourselves by doing projects for larger companies. We started collecting assets, technology assets, that we could, in 5 years into the journey, we started leveraging towards our own product, which at the time was called Enterprise Portal. It was a web-based portal that allowed business applications that were not on the web. Remember, this was mid-90s, to actually be exposed on the web. And basically, companies that were not able to get their software onto the web use their top tier to kind of expose and get a web experience. By the way, 5 years after that, this is where SAP acquired top tier for, at the time, a very significant amount of money, because SAP was considered to be the company that missed the web, and they had to very quickly webify their applications, and they used Earnix to do it, very top tier to do it.
And was the plan when you set off to provide services and try to see how through those services you evolve into a product?
Yeah, we always had the notion that we would become our own company, with our own product, just so we couldn't afford it. Again, very different times, no place to raise money. So we basically had to collect it by doing these software projects. By the way, very innovative, great software projects. But we did it for other companies, not for ourselves.
But how did you have that wisdom that building a product would be something that at the long run would be more profitable and successful than providing services? Because many companies actually opt for the service, whereas I think these days it's pretty clear that a product would be the way to go, but I'm not sure in the 90s that was very clear.
No, I think it was clear. Look, Israel was very much behind at the time. If you look at Silicon Valley, which was our model the whole time, the notion of product companies with VCs, etc., forming and becoming very successful product companies was very well known. It's just that it wasn't something that was very common in Israel, and definitely the funding wasn't. So we knew what we wanted to do. The aspiration was very significant, just that we had to do it in a different way than companies in the last, 20 years are doing.
So who are these people who believed in you? Like, who are the investors then? It was pre-VCs. So who are these crazy people investing in these 20-year-olds, with little experience? Like, who is the people who jumped on and what did that mean for you?
So for the first 5 years, nobody. We had some basic funding from Ruben and Shai, but very basic, and the rest was self-funded by the company. There weren't any investors. And by the way, maybe if we were seeking investors, they would say, "You're crazy, you are these crazy kids." So at that stage, no one. The first money we've raised was 5 years later, 1996. This is when we had the actual product, or the initial phases of the actual product of the enterprise portal. And by then it was fairly clear that there's something significant.
So actually you A/B tested this whole time and created the brainstorming of the idea while giving services.
If you have the funds, you can go in a straight line towards your goal. Now, often it won't be successful. Many companies fail in doing so and disappear into the wind. When you do it the way we have done it, basically developing for other people, you definitely don't go in a straight line because different companies pull you in different directions. But as the time progressed, we basically, the common thing about everything we've done just happened to be that it had a lot to do with how consumers, or how the users, I would say, consume applications. And we thought we found a modern, unique way of doing it, and kind of it more or less was the commonality between everything we were doing. That's how the notion of this enterprise portal came about.
But that's an amazing way to find that product market fit. Because you're working with different clients, you're not just guessing, you're actually providing a service and getting feedback and seeing what's resonating and what isn't, and through that honing what becomes a product. I think that's a fantastic way to go. I think versus, knowing exactly what you want to do and getting funding, I would say any day that sounds like a better plan.
Would you do it differently?
It's definitely a better plan, but it has its costs. It's slow because you experiment. It's also slow because you don't have the funding, which is an accelerator. And definitely, if you look at the craziness of what's happening in the market now, or happened in the last 12 months, funding is a mega accelerator of operations. So I think it's more solid, but it's slower.
Interesting, because I would say, the fundings are mega accelerators, but they sometimes sort of make startups lift their ear off the ground. And when you have to listen all the time, then you have to be more accurate. So I guess that's those are just different tactics maybe towards the same goal.
Yeah. By the way, I fully agree. I think many companies, quoting you, lifted their ears off the ground while maybe losing direction because of the great idea and a lot of money. Again, it's all about balance. It's good if you can run faster if you know what you're doing. It's also, you need to remember not to get confused because the fact that you've raised a lot of money doesn't mean that you're going to be successful. Doesn't mean you can build a solid business with solid business model with sustainable growth. It just means that at a certain point in time, someone thought you could. That's all it means.
Yeah, it seems like the press sometimes and social media tend to pop the champagne on the actual rounds of funding, versus what success truly means, when sometimes even there are very impressive lifestyle businesses that are not on the radar because they don't qualify as success based on very narrow metrics. So it's interesting to hear, sort of that perspective just in general of just being on the ground and adding value and understanding what value means to your customers.
Yeah, and being in the tech scene for over 30 years now, I've also seen it evolve, and I think you're right. I think the measurement of success has changed. I think a lot of it has to do with the media, and a lot of it has to do with what is being celebrated. Just the fact celebrating how much money you've raised. I mean, it's great. It's a great achievement. It's not easy to raise money. It's not easy to convince people that your business is worth investing in, and definitely not these amounts. So, chapeau, that's great. But what does it mean? I mean, are you able to provide real value to customers? Are you able to provide a sustainable business model that is not just about spending $5 to gain $1, and I think that is something that happened in the market in the last couple of years. We all enjoy this, but it has its price, because sometimes people do get confused. And our industry is a manic depressive industry. When everything's going crazy, it's really crazy. Everyone is being told, forget about business models, forget about anything, just grow, spend as much money as you can. And a minute later, when depression hits that side of the manic depression, it's all about layoffs and what do you mean? What about profitability? A word that wasn't even used in the last couple of years. Now, that's the basics of the industry nowadays. This manic depression. We need to learn how to live with it. There's a good side of that.
Balance, as you said.
Yeah. I think it's all about balance, and maybe being older than some of the people, maybe having been through the 2001 crises and the 2008 one, and going through these cycles, you learn that you just not to get confused, not to get confused in the manic, and also not in the depression side of it. It's all about balance, and if you do it right, the spikes are, they exist, but they're much softer and smaller than what you're seeing out there.
What is success then? How do you know? It's not raising money. It may not be an exit. Well, how did you know when you were successful? When did you own it?
Yeah, maybe the best answer would be, when SAP acquired Top-Tier, it was a $400 million acquisition right after the crash of the market. So it was a very, very significant financial transaction. But I remember the first customer conference SAP had. I was in the audience, and the technology of Top-Tier was presented to customers as a default for all of them in the future. And I had this thought in my mind that with all the money that the transaction was involved, I'm so much prouder of just the fact that now what I've built with my team's own hands will reach the whole world. So there's always the financial aspects of success, but I think really it's about how much difference do you make. Have you able? It is. Definitely you can say in healthcare and other areas where it's probably more important, but even in business, were you able to build something that changes the world? And I think to me that's what we should strive for. Being in a place where potentially you can change the world. It's very rewarding, very rewarding.
I love that. And I think you can serve within the inner compass for a startup, raising money, but not exactly sure what success is with respect to profitability and all those words thrown around now and a bubble bursting. Then I think if you're making an impact, then I think that's a good sign.
Yeah, I think you're right. And because, again, this manic depression, people get confused. They're measuring the wrong things. And I think what I try to do, and it's not always easy, is, you're being pulled in different directions, is really to ask the basic questions. Is this bringing value to customers? Are customers happy? Is it, my great investor's deck, or is it really that a customer would say that this is what it's doing? And I think at the end of the day, and again, it goes back to the same word, to balance. If you're building something that does bring value, customers are happy with, good things will happen. And if the market is large enough, of course, good things will happen. Even if, at any given point in time, there is a sexier company that is doing something that is, hotter than what you're doing. If you're building something that is real, that brings real value and customers are happy with it, the market is large enough, good things will happen.
Did you take time off after that exit?
Not after the exit. It's always, when you get off one road and you hit a larger road and cars are flying all over you, and so you have to drive fast. But I did for a few months after I left SAP 6 years after the transaction. But I'm actually not good at taking time off.
Why?
I love the action. And, maybe some people will say I didn't exercise the muscle of taking time off, which is probably true. But I give myself the rationale that I just love the action. And I enjoy it. I enjoy the adrenaline of the action. Enjoy the family that comes with it. And obviously I have my own family that I love and enjoy spending time with. There's always a family at the office. And I enjoy the camaraderie, the work with people, the partnership. It's a little lonely when you're taking time off.
We're excited to be collaborating with the Israeli website CTech, owned by Kalkalist, Israel's leading business newspaper. CTech is the gateway of the Israeli high-tech to the tech world and vice versa. If you're not already a regular reader, we strongly recommend that you check out kalkalistech.com, CALCALISTECH.com, to stay up to date on all high-impact stories from the Israeli tech scene. And what was that larger road that you felt that you were now embarking?
Yeah, so, anytime you're doing something that is smaller, could be extremely exciting, could be something that potentially could change the world, but it is small. And when you're small, you don't have the tools in the company, the people or the processes, the systems to operate in a big way. And when you either grow organically, which also happens, and we're experiencing this at Earnix nowadays, or when you're join forces and acquired by a large company, all of a sudden, in one day, you get the exposure of the whole market. And again, if I take the top tier SAP example, it was a 270 people company. When SAP acquired us, they were 35,000, the largest enterprise software company in the world. Almost every transaction in the world somehow is related to SAP. And all of a sudden, from chasing, again, go back to chasing customers, our own customers at top tier, which is a painful thing, but in any small company, all of a sudden, most of the market is using what we're doing. That's a very significant highway that you get on, and it has different constraints, different requirements, different demands. By the way, an amazing school for me, coming from a smaller company. Did you suddenly feel like you're punching above your weight? No, I never had that feeling. But as I said, it was an amazing school. We came out of a startup. That's the first thing we've done of 10 years. We knew we were doing a great thing, but all of a sudden we came to a company that was the best in the world, and the largest in the world. And there's so much to learn. And when people ask me how I became what I am today, and probably, the same word, balance, is being an entrepreneur creates different muscles, or certain muscles, and in a big way. being a large company, you basically build very different muscles. And I think the balance between the different muscles is what creates a whole person, a whole executive.
So you're coming into an office now and it's a whole new life in a sense. And there's so much that you don't know. And I think it's probably easy to get overwhelmed. Do you have, who do you learn from? Is it just, trial and error, or are there suddenly all these guidelines that you have to adhere to and through that adjust and absorb, or like, how do you navigate this?
I'll share a little bit how I started Earnix in my current company 6 years ago. Earnix sells mostly to insurance and banking, two industries that I'm not an expert in. I came in and I didn't know much about the industry. I didn't know much about the product. It's a very analytical product. That's pricing, personalization, very sophisticated product. And I didn't know much about technology, and I definitely didn't know much about the industry. So here's your question. What do you do? How do you know what you're doing? I think, first of all, I think there's a lot of commonality in management, and a lot of common sense that you bring, regardless of what, the subject matter is. Having said that, I think the most important thing is, and I try to tell this to every person I hire, sometimes I'm successful in sharing that, and sometimes not, is that use your ears, not your mouth. Listen, 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 and listen. It's very tempting as a manager, especially if you're kind of anxious to prove yourself that you're worthy of the job. It's very tempting to spit out what you think, all coming from your prior experience. That's a mistake. You have to listen a lot. And there are always smart people around you, people that know the industry, know the product, that have different perspectives. Now, of course, when they hired me, they wanted my experience. They wanted me to use the tools I've generated in 25 years prior. But I took the time to basically kind of mix the learnings from the people that were in the company. And you have to be humble. You have to ask questions. You have to basically not say, here, I know what needs to be done. And then mix all that knowledge with your prior experience and knowledge, which always is important. New perspective is always good. And I think the mixture is what gives the end result at the end again. Definitely work balance.
And there was a chapter before Earnix where you were an employee, right?
Well, yeah, I always like to think of myself as an employee as well.
Okay, fair, but like not a partner.
Yeah, I was an executive. I mean, since we sold Talktier, which was the co-founder of, I was always an executive, but you're always also an employee. Even now, and I'm the CEO for the last 10 years at the board who I work for, and so you're always part manager and part employee to a certain degree.
Okay, no, but I'm sort of pointing towards you not being an entrepreneur for a while.
Oh yeah, definitely.
What did that give you, being like an executive in like international companies like Superpowers? Because it's sort of like the nowadays, people are it's like studying that they don't get it anymore. You know what I mean? And working on those global companies, everybody wants the 4 people, 8 people, Instagram exits. So like, what did that give you in a sense? Like, did it give you, or was it a waste of time?
I think it's absolutely a major part of my toolbox. What it gave me is mostly to learn how to operate and scale. Usually when you're an entrepreneur, it's very clear what you're doing and how you're doing it in a small scale. And I always say, getting to your first $1 million of sales is very difficult. And then getting from 1 to 10 is very difficult. Getting from 10 to 100 is very difficult. And from 100 to billions is also very difficult. It's almost like different tools that we need to use. And, I've been on boards of companies that, great companies, that the entrepreneur grew the company to 10, 12, $15 million of sales, and he thought that he could use the exact same tools he was using to grow the company to a larger company. It just didn't work. And I think what I got from both being an entrepreneur but also working as an executive in large companies is the understanding of what it needs to operate at scale. What does it look like? What you should strive for when you are smaller and want to build an operation that could scale that way. think the balance between knowing how to operate in a very small scale and a very entrepreneurship style, which is a lot of risk taking and a lot of adventures almost, and at the same time knowing how to operate as the largest in its industry company, it paves the road on what needs to be done.
But we want to give some listeners some cheats. So, like, give me in a practical sense, like, give me 3 lessons on scaling if I want to have a global things to watch out from, or, things that, I need to do scale.
Sure. I think the most difficult challenge smaller companies face in scaling up is what I call the hero mentality. In small companies, what you mostly have are a few heroes, usually founders, but it could be other people around them. They basically know how to do everything and they actually get everything done. And whether it's in sales or in product, it really doesn't matter. It's these heroes that create the company. Heroes, as heroic as they are, can only scale that much. And it's easier to kind of talk about sales. So if you have a hero salesperson, one of the founders, and let's say they sell 5 times more than a normal person could, but they don't sell 20 times more. And if you want to sell 20 times more, it has to change. And that's probably the most difficult part, because the instinct of these heroes is to continue being heroes and to basically overshadow everyone around them in a good, not in bad intent. And it's extremely important when you look at scale that there are a lot of, I would say, great people, good people, even mediocre people that get stuff done. And the realization that you cannot only build an organization on these heroes is very significant, because that's, in many cases, that's when people hit a wall. So that's one. Second learning is, in a small company, you usually think that the company should and can do everything. When you grow up, you learn that even the largest of companies are built on partnerships. They're different levers for scale. One very significant one is the right partnerships. I remember at SAP, at one point in time, SAP was selling $30-something billion. I mean, it's a huge company. And the CEO said he was challenged by, why are you giving so much services to some partners? And he said, look, yeah, we can do those services. We can get those billions ourselves, but then we won't be leveraging their assets and their presence in market. So, that's a second learning. I would say that if you form the right partnerships, it's a very, very significant scaling factor. And we wanted 3, so here's the third. Many companies, again, small entrepreneurial companies, they're all built on a single product. When you talk about enterprise software, which is where I've been at for the last 30 plus years, you cannot cut it with a single product. It's very tempting to say, I'm very good at this product, I'll just do this. At the end of the day, you need to be able to sell more products to the same customers. And so if the instinct is to say, I'm very good at this, let's just do this, the learning from larger companies that you have to constantly build new products and create a multi-product strategy, so that your salespeople have more to sell to the same customers.
Sort of keep reinventing yourself and don't get too comfortable.
Yeah, and exactly. I mean, that's always true, but also reinventing by broadening the offering, not just by, reinventing the next feature within the same product. I mean, think of, these are consumer examples, but think of Apple just selling one thing. I mean, they were building computers, and then iPods, and then phones, and now look what they're doing. Look at Amazon. I mean, what does an online bookstore has to do with a cloud, the largest cloud service company in the world? At the end of the day, if you just keep doing the exact thing you're good at, that's not good enough if you want to scale. These were consumer product examples, but it's just the same for businesses. It's a very important learning.
Why did you start Earnix?
I didn't start Earnix. I joined Earnix 15 years after it was started. Earnix was a great company before I joined. It was a company that was looking for scale. It had a great product, great customers, great people. And I think in some senses, was growing slower than the potential was. And when they asked me to join as CEO, basically what the investors wanted me to do was scale it up, and which is my passion in life. And especially if you come into a good company that has solid foundation, which is always about product, people, and customers. It's fun. It's not easy, but it's fun to scale.
How do you do that? Because it's sort of like a programmer taking over a site, and a different code. So, like, how do you get in a company, and there's also the authority thing, and there's also the culture and accepting yourself and understanding, the deep, I call it like metaphorically code. How do you integrate yourself?
Yeah. Again, there are different philosophies. Mine is collaboration, engagement, partnership. You always have the authority, and that's a given. The CEO has the authority, and people get it right away. Now the question is, how do you apply it? Do you apply it in brute force? And there's very successful CEOs that will tell you that the first day they come in, they fire 3 of the VPs, establish that they're the bosses, and you know what? I don't want to argue. I mean, if it works for them, great. My style is very different. I think, again, it's about listening, it's about collaborating, it's about forming partnerships. At the end of the day, when you're brought into a job like this, you're brought in to make a change. So obviously, it's not just about let's continue inertia. But the way to get the people to follow you, in my mind, is all about partnership, collaboration, engagement with them. And I don't want to say slowly because it wasn't slow, but not in radical, almost irrational movements, but rather in a more fluid, harmonic way that people understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, and even if you are making changes, and obviously I did, it becomes something that makes sense to people, that is rational.
And it sounds like the board here are good partners, because I'm assuming that being able to identify that the company is scaling, but it's not maximizing potential, is not something that's intuitive necessarily.
You're absolutely right. I think in the Earnix case, I think they were smart enough, and I would say in the market enough, because sometimes you find boards that are completely disconnected. They look, and again, I'm not judging anyone, but they look at the Excel sheets versus looking at businesses, and this one did understand the business. They were speaking to customers. They understood at a certain point in time, they understood that the value of the company is much bigger than the company thinks. And again, the word scale, now we call companies like Earnix scale-ups. 6 years ago, that term wasn't used, but they figured that what they need to scale, and I guess when they looked for me, again, I didn't come from the background of the industries or even the technology, but I did what they thought possessed the scaling up muscles that are required.
Which is pretty evident that you do. And I'm also assuming that this is not going to be the last startup that you enter either by founding or by joining in order to scale, right? Like you really love this, don't you?
Yeah, I love it. I think there's nothing professionally more gratifying than taking something that has potential and growing it. You know what? The concern breeds like kids. Yeah, I love it. And I don't need to stop it.
What's your superpower?
Can I say luck? Luck has a lot to do with a lot of powers. Not many people admit it, I guess. But
by the way, luck is a superpower. In Hebrew they say mazal, which is makom zman lasot, which means place, timing, and actually doing. So as an executioner in the beginning, it could be, but you have to make it in a practical sense because it's not the external.
Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. But I think the combination of on the one hand being very analytical, I'm an engineer by education and very analytical, but at the same time, I think with very, very, very healthy instincts. And I think if you're looking at any manager, definitely CEO, I think that's a very, very important balance. If you're only intuitive, if you're only following instincts, you may be doing the wrong things. But I also think if you're only analytical and looking only at the Excel sheets of the world and the business models of the world, you're also missing something. And I think throughout the years, I've gained kind of a very balanced combination of the analytical and intuitive way of managing, which I enjoy. I think it's fun, but I also think it's successful.
And your kryptonite?
Maybe you touched. I mean, it's personal, but maybe you touched upon the inability to take time off, to not do what I'm doing. One day I may have to change that.
But also one of the first things that you've mentioned is your concern towards your kids. So maybe in a sense, by doing, you're also distracting yourself to not over worry.
Or maybe the superpower is a little bit of both, called accountability. Because I think are you accountable? It sounds like the superpower, you are analytical, but you tend to be as a person that's very accountable.
Yeah.
So that's why you're always doing, because you're always accountable about something. Is there truth in that, or did I throw it off?
No, it's very insightful. I'm very accountable, and I also think accountability is an incredibly important trait for professionally and personally. Absolutely right. I don't think I'm distracted. I'm not worried as on the spectrum of people. I don't think I would be considered a worried person. But I'm sure work is distracting, in a good way, from a lot of stuff that's happening. Absolutely.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
And lots of luck scaling stuff.
Thanks.
Scaling stuff.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Real life.
Superpowers.
Up in the sky, it's a bird. It's a plane.
Gentlemen, we can rebuild him. We have the technology.
It's alive.
Real life.
Superpowers.